Welcome to Cars on Call. I am automotive journalist Steve Schutz, along with trauma surgeon Stephan Moran. We're the only podcast that has a trauma surgeon that can talk about car safety and actually know what they're talking about. Just kidding, but
Most of the time.
it differentiates us. So, has operated on countless crash victims and is here.
Hey, we got a doctor, journalist in Steve-O. And then we've got a man who knows the market and has a brain full of amazing car stuff, Adams Hudson. So we're well-rounded here.
We are.
I have a doctorate in bad automotive investments. I can lead you through it. And Steph, I'm taking a look at you here on the screen, and I see you rubbing your chin. Did you have a traumatic beard event lately? Because it was a lot longer previously.
Well,
Did Ellen shave it in your sleep?
no, well, actually, I'm having surgery tomorrow, and they've got to basically peel my face off to get to the tumor that's in my salivary gland. So I went ahead. It was nice for the doctor to shave the beard off. But my wife is very happy. She's like, "Why don't you just shave the rest?" I'm like, "Because I'm not back in the military yet." So,
Not yet.
We'll be obviously thinking about you
We
tomorrow,
will.
Stefan.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
not know that.
All right. We're going to talk about car spot in Orange County because it's pretty unique. We're going to talk car safety with, again, our trauma surgeon, Dr. Moran. We're going to talk an interesting thing, and I cannot take credit for this topic, but we can take credit because we're going to do it better. Haggerty, the magazine, and the insurance company sends out these emails with different automotive topics, and sometimes they're good. And this was good. It was good cars or even great cars that are let down by their engines. The engine aren't good enough for the car, not worthy of the car. So we're going to talk about that.
not
We've each got a
worthy.
list. Yeah, we're not worthy. We got a list. And finally, we're going to talk something else. We're going to talk a little electric car. Stefan has something he wants to talk about in that area. And we can kind of take, guys, we can take a victory lap. 3 years ago, we said that this not ready for prime time. BEVs are really not ready yet, and they're not going to take over the world the way everyone says they are. And we've been proven true. Everything gets, 20 years from now, is everything going to be electric? Yeah, I guess probably, but not 5 years from now, and maybe not 10 years from now.
You're right, Steve. Without belaboring that point, it seemed, I swear, at the time, now we were not completely alone in the topic, but at the time when we started saying, the world's not ready for this. The infrastructure is not ready, the manufacturer's not ready, the consumer's not ready, the charging facilities are not ready. It felt odd to be saying that because all the press and all the media was like,
Yep.
rah, rah, we're doing this. You're going to be left behind anyway. Here we
Yeah, it's,
are.
it's like Stefan, you remember even when it was just the two of us. Everyone else drank the Kool-Aid and we didn't.
Yeah, we said exactly. We're like, this ain't gonna happen. It can't happen. The world's not ready. The manufacturers aren't ready. The infrastructure's not there. This is just the Holland tulip craze. And yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll finish up the show talking about what I think is going to be the great automotive crash out as a result of the rest of the world being America, England. The basis of most automotive manufacturing will not be able to keep up with the Chinese. So we'll talk about it that later on.
So we're going to end on a high note, is what you're
We're on a high note. Yep.
saying. We'll turn it.
Yeah, I can't wait. So, I was in Orange County. My oldest son and his wife live there, and I was, actually not just in Orange County, but the kind of the epicenter of the Orange County-ness, which is Newport Beach. And it is astounding what you see. I saw five BEV Porsche Macans just released, and I just saw five driving around.
Yeah, worth 50% of what
Innumerable.
they paid for them.
Absolutely. Well, as we've discussed, you want to buy an electric car, you're not going to get any argument from me, but you better lease it. And I guarantee you 90%, 95% of
Yep.
Macan BEVs are going to be leased. Too numerous to count. Lambos, mostly Huracans, but all kinds of Lambos. Ferraris, special Porsches. I got a picture of one that I followed, and just it's amazing what you see. Rolls-Royce and Bentley are very common down there, and all kinds of Bentleys. I saw the Mulsanne, and mostly new ones. the GTC, which of course is your favorite.
Oh, my very
Um,
favorite car in the whole world.
yeah, I mean, I saw so many. So we'll go through some of the pictures, but it is astounding what you see down there. And again, this, you see tons of Teslas, but I'm not seeing other brands electric cars very often. Decent number of Audis. So this is kind of fun. This was on Balboa Island. This is like a safari Volkswagen. It looks like a 1972, 71, 73. I don't know, probably 72, 73. Adams, what do you think?
No, I think you're right. I think, I guarantee there's a VW person that'll tell you from the size of the back window and the number of vents below it, they could tell you
Okay.
exactly what year that is. But I want to like go back to it to a little bit of a point when you're talking about Orange County and the epicenter of the car culture. There's such an easy target to pick about. Oh, the culture of California is so negative and anti-car now with the carb laws, et cetera, and trying to get a car certified. But we all owe a huge debt of gratitude to the car culture that is right there. That is almost ground zero for hot rodding, customizing, the origination of from European cars to Japanese cars to Korean cars. I'm telling you, for whatever reason, it seemed like it started there and just billowed east
Hey,
from.
Carol Shelby Cobra, my
There you
favorite car in the
go.
whole world, California
Yep.
born.
Yep.
Yeah. The thing
All
that's
the
interesting,
customizers, everyone.
yeah, if you own I almost nobody owns a Ferrari where I live in Idaho because if you own a Ferrari or a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, first of all, it's just not the culture. You're supposed to drive an F-150 no matter how much money you have. But second of all, if you want to get it fixed, you have to truck it to Salt Lake City or Seattle. If you're in Newport Beach, there's a lot of places, independent shops that will fix your Rolls Royce or your Bentley.
Yeah, I read this a long time ago, and I may be wrong here, but part of the reason that California became the car culture center was post World War II manufacturing. There was a lot of aircraft manufacturing occurred in California. And then, so they had the infrastructure, the people learned how to work with metal. Then you had everybody that came home post World War II, that boomer generation, some affluence, and boom, the car culture was born really out of World War II. Am I mistaken on that? Have you read that before? I just have
You
a,
are, Steve, you go ahead and comment. I'll mention something about the aircraft industry.
Well, number one, there were people that knew how to work with metal, and so that's how you got crafters like Shelby, Carol Shelby's shop and other shops, and the hot rodders. So they knew how to work with metal and the factories that the aerospace. But it's a combination of know-how and that kind of thing combined with the weather makes a difference. The weather's unbelievable. You just cannot believe how great it is. 72 degrees, 78 degrees, maybe 82 degrees and 72 degrees and sunny. The weather's unbelievable. And
maybe
then,
fire.
well, but yeah, you're always going to have those wildfires in selected areas. But the most important thing is the combination of all that combined with lots and lots of money and the movement of the entire entertainment industry from New York to Southern California made a huge, huge difference.
Yep, I would have to agree with all those things, and I think that there was a huge presence of talent looking for a place to land.
Mm.
And the post-World War II stuff and all the artisans in California was embracing of artistic and personal expression and freedom. That can go too far, as we all know, and it's not worthy of this conversation. But I think people were willing to express themselves, and no one had ever even heard of aerodynamics and hand forming aluminum and turning a belly tanker into an automobile, taking the underside of an airplane wing and then turning it upside down into a car. Who does that? This culture was ripe for the exploitation of that type artistry, and we are not, we're sort of the beneficiaries of this many years later.
The
Yeah.
desert racing and all the racetracks. So, all right, so we get this one. Let's maybe scroll to the next one. That's a good looking
Uh,
Volkswagen. I learned to drive. That's a flat window, by the way. I learned to drive a stick shift. My very first car I ever drove was a Volkswagen Beetle.
Wow,
See,
that's
that's
cool.
spoken like a VW guy. What does flat win? I know what flat window means, but what year does that mean it predates?
Ooh, it predates. This has got LED headlights, but I don't know. We'd have to get Andrew Clark back on here. He could tell us, but I
Oh,
know
he's
there's a,
frothing
It
at the
was
mouth
it was
at my
uh,
sometime.
comment.
I'll answer that. Sometime in the mid '70s, they introduced a larger Beetle called the Super Beetle, and that was in the mid
uh,
'70s. And it had round taillights, not oval like the really old ones, and not kind of almost triangular like this one, but they were fully round. And it had a sculpted kind of rounded off windshield, and that's
yeah.
how you could tell a Super Beetle. And that came off. That came out in the mid to late '70s. Is really the swan song of the Beatle. Anyway, keep rolling, scrolling. I don't want to spend too much time. You guys can picture this one. I thought was
Okay.
interesting. I was on Pacific Coast Highway, and this is a very very special car. It's basically it's a 991.2 911 Speedster, but it's basically I think it's a GT3 RS engine and transmission. Adams, you can correct me. Is that right?
I'm going to go with it. I'm going to vote with you on that. And you got to love the tag.
Well, I thought
Yeah.
the tag was interesting because it says basically 911 ST, and I felt like the guy because this is at least a 5 or 6 year old car, and if you have a speedster from that era, you're probably going to get a phone call saying, "Hey, do you want an ST?" And I bet you this guy got the phone call, he configured it, and then he got the license plate for that car, and it's sitting on his speedster waiting for the ST.
That's
That
got that
is,
kind of.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's a great thing. You know, from a distance, it almost looks like it says nihilist, but
Yeah.
I
Is
don't
that
think
kind of
it
like a
does.
bluish gray? I mean, I know the color's a little bit off, but it looks like a great color.
It was, I think it's GT silver. It's just
Okay,
a nice
GT silver.
silver.
Yeah.
It doesn't project well in the picture. And then you keep going. This, I took a
Oh, there you
picture for
go.
you. This is
Yes.
a Dr. Moran mobile. It's a Gulf Blue Bentley convertible.
The Continental GT. I just gotta love that car. Just
So good
I
looking.
gotta say that it gives me a Woody every time I see one.
Little TMI going
That's
on.
TMI.
Keeping it
Yeah, thank
there.
you. That's
I
TMI.
love those cars, man. God, they're
I,
so
I
awesome.
tell my son this is a 1960s and 70s SUV.
Oh
It's a big
yeah.
station wagon. You'd
Okay.
have 6 kids in this, no problem.
Big as a whale, land yacht.
Yeah,
And
6 kids.
none of them in seat belts.
Yes.
No, oh no, God, goodness no. This you see a lot of these old '80s BMWs. This is a 5 Series. It's just a five. I think it's a 535i from the probably mid 1980s. But the license plate says Jawohl. I thought that was great. There's a this. I took a picture of this Lamborghini. There were tons of Lamborghinis. This is a Huracan, but this is very weird. I almost like whoa, whoa, whoa. What is this? I had trouble recognizing it. Have you ever, Adams, ever see a Lamborghini with a tasteful paint job? It blew my mind. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's from outer space.
Yeah.
I was looking at that paint thinking, I've never seen a Lamborghini with this is so for listeners, it's kind of like a metallic, little bit lighter British racing green. I have no idea but it's like, yeah, it's like that's a nice looking color on that
It
car.
actually is, you know, and what is it about us? You know, we're so used to seeing these incredibly
I
flamboyant,
mean,
extrovert looking colors with black wheels. Something about this being dark green with regular, brushed alloy, like,
it looks
God and the machinist all intended that alloy to look like that color. I think it looks fantastic. And
it
Steve, I
does
was
look
taking a picture too.
fantastic.
I did a double take.
Yeah, you're. Here's the problem. You have this car in Orange County, and your blonde girlfriend with the Brazilian blowout hair and breast enhancements is not going to like this. Her personal trainer has an orange one.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of that's all I wanted to spend time on it. But it really is cool to if you're a car guy, you will absolutely enjoy Southern California. It's really really cool. All right, let's move on to safety. Dr. Moran, what do you got?
All right, we're just gonna be brief today. Let me find it here. I gotta pull up my there it is. I want it so I've talked a lot about advanced driver assistance systems, and I got the new F-150 that has Blue Cruise Control, and I kind of done a 180 on my impression of automatic advanced driver assistance systems. Well, now
Showing
what
that we can all learn.
so that we all, yes, exactly that, and we're now starting to see some literature, and I read a really interesting article that was called "Rethinking Advanced Driver System Taxonomies: A Framework and Inventory of Real-World Safety Performance." But this is a long topic. This is a scientific paper. It came out of the Netherlands by Sander de Winkel and Michael Christoph. But what they did was they looked at all the literature from Europe where they've looked at crashes and what ADAS systems were in those vehicles. And I don't want to go into a lot of the detail, but the big takeaways. So when they looked at the data, it's kind of they combine all this data, but lane keeping assist, which is very different from the Karen lane departure warning system. So lane keeping assist is where the vehicle keeps you in your lane when you drift because you're looking at your phone, you're talking, you don't see something. Very different than lane departure warning that screams at you and vibrates the steering wheel when you drift away, which everybody turns off because it's so obnoxious. So lane keeping assist I have in my vehicle. And basically what it is, it's in vehicles that have autonomous driving, so it can actually steer. Well, they found that um, decreased crashes by 19% with lane keep assist. That I've talked about this. The bottom line is all of us when we drive, no matter how attentive you are, just think about the last time you had to like kind of move the steering wheel because you drifted over the right hand lane or the left side, or you didn't see something, or you just were looking at your phone a little longer, or you heard that ding on your phone, you got a little dopamine surge. You're like, oh, who's liking me now? The other thing, the next one that had the big effect was the driver monitoring systems. They decreased crashes by 14%. My Ford F-150 has this, General Motors has it. And it's amazing where it's got this little radar camera on the A pillar that's looking at your eyes. And I like stared straight ahead, but then like moved my eyes to the right while the car was driving, and it noticed it. And I did it with sunglasses. So it's pretty amazing, but decreased crashes by 14%. And what the literature is really starting to show is that with these autonomous driving systems, it's key that they have an integrated driver monitoring system that doesn't let you just do like the guy in full self-driving mode in the Tesla, put, cardboard up in the windows as going down the interstate. Automatic emergency braking decreased crashes by 10%. Two things that were interesting to me was adaptive cruise control and so adaptive cruise control is where you set your cruise control and you're going down the road, and if a car slows down in front of you, your car slows down. Then regular old-fashioned cruise control where it doesn't. Those were associated with increased crash rates by 8% and 12% respectively. But what's important to understand is these were in vehicles that did not have driver monitoring systems with them as well. So what that means is people just flip on the cruise control and then they feel like they're on autopilot, self-driving mode, and they don't pay attention as much. So I can see how the human behavior with that changes. And what this is really taken away from me is similar to my experience, that what you want is lane keeping assist with a monitoring system, and then you've got the adaptive cruise control. So you want advanced driver assistance systems that monitor you, requiring you to still be a co-pilot. Or look at it, you're the pilot, but you're letting the automated systems be the co-pilot. But you are still an interactive driver. And so when I take my takeaway from all this is that you want systems that still monitor the driver. And we will get to the day where we have level 5 full autonomous driving, but our roads are not there yet. The software is not there yet. And then you have to consider the behavior of other people on the roads. And Ford has had a recall and has been looking at by, it's not a recall, but they're being looked at by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration because a lot of these systems are based upon logic, typical driving pattern. So if you're going down the interstate and somebody chooses to stop their car in the left-hand lane in the middle of the night in the left-hand lane and with no lights on, the vehicle doesn't recognize that until it's too late, as well as you don't either as a driver. So that's why you still need to be the pilot of the vehicle with an interactive systems that monitors you. Yes, you let the vehicle drive, but you are still sitting in that left-hand seat of that vehicle, not wanting to die yourself at the risk of the automated driving system. We're going to see more and more data like this, and this data that I talked about will also play a role in when we end our discussion about EVs and how the rest of the world is going to get behind very quickly. So
You know,
that's all I got on safety.
well, it's interesting to see that the progression of this autonomous driving that we all sort of were told, 2, 3 years ago, that it was just going to take over, that we have had to go from I'm going to be the pilot of my vehicle, i.e., I'm doing everything, I'm making every decision, I'm turning on the blinker exactly when I'm supposed to, all those other things. When it advanced too far, people got lazy and or complacent.
Yes.
But now that they've installed these incremental steps, like you better be paying attention, or we're not going to do our job as effectively as we could do it together. I think it's kind of interesting that they're sort of keeping the human being involved, and I think it makes me feel better about knowing that that's out there.
Well, like I've talked about, this is a learning curve, and there's no role for beta software in full self-driving mode. There's just no role
Yeah,
for it
yeah,
because everybody else on the road is part of this experiment. So the question is, how do you ethically propose an experiment and have self-driving vehicles when you have non-self-driving vehicles?
right.
So the takeaway for me from this literature is very clearly that these systems have to have driver monitoring systems to make sure, even though the vehicle is driving itself, which my truck does, hands off free, it drives itself. It is monitoring me to make sure that I am still an active participant in the driving of the vehicle, the operation of the vehicle is a better. Airplanes have autopilot, okay? And the pilots let the plane take off on autopilot. You got a pilot and a co-pilot that are talking together. They'll start monitoring the systems in the aircraft, even though it is an autopilot. So
Hmm.
I think that, um, to echo what Adam said, there was a lot of talk years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, about how this is going to be self-driving was going to take over in 10 years. And I remember one of my partners at work asked me, and I said, no way, 10 years. No way, 10 years. Maybe, I don't even think 20. And that was 10 years ago. But there's two things that I've noticed. Number one, there's been a lot more full self-driving happening. Waymo was San Francisco only. Now it's LA and Phoenix. Many more Waymo cars driving around. And then there are many, many more quote unquote full self-driving Teslas driving around. And I think two things have happened. Number one, a lot more vehicles. Number two, obviously fewer crashes. I can't, the last one we talked about was about a year ago. Definitely fewer crashes. And you would think with more vehicles, there would be more crashes. Therefore, I think what's happening is this machine learning that we've been hearing about is actually happening. And the machines
yes,
and the computers are learning using AI to not drive into the side of a semi truck because you thought it was the sky, which happened probably 5 years ago, the first death in a Tesla, or on the 101 in San Jose, mistaking a lane that went right into a barrier and killed an Apple engineer about 3 or 4 years ago. Those things aren't happening anymore. I think it's because number one, better sensors, number two, machine learning. And I think as the machine learning really accelerates, I think we're closer than I thought even a year ago.
I agree. The data's coming in, but it's like, think about it. A self-driving car is driving on code that a human has said, this is what the road looks like. These are what the markers look like. But they have to account for every scenario in that code. And there are instances showing up, like the barrier, that weren't in the code and it doesn't know what to do. That's why eventually, yes, we will get there. But like I said, I still think that the European way of delineating certain interstates, roadways that are clearly marked, that are well monitored, that yeah, there's full self-driving mode here, but not on your two-lane road, not coming out of your neighborhood because we don't know the data. Kid coming down a tricycle on a driveway. I mean, there's all kind of stuff that can come in that are not a plus and a minus or is a one and a zero in the world of coding. But as the data comes in, yes, these vehicles will get better and better. That's why I said these beta modes of Tesla making us the software was way more controlled environment, way more sensors than any other vehicles made by any other manufacturer. So, but you're right, we will get there, and they are safer. But you have to worry, But do you want to be the one case that it wasn't safer because it wasn't in the code?
Well, you don't want to be in the one case of anything, Stefan, but
Right. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you never want to be the one case. But I heard an analogy, and I do want to throw this out there because I think it's important. And it changed how I think about AI and machine learning. And that is a child puts his or her hand on a hot stove and knows to never put the hand on a hot stove. A computer has to see every stove before it really knows not to put your hand on the stove. A child can see a stove, it's in the kitchen, and it makes that connection because we're humans and we have a great brain. The computer needs to see every damn stove and to know don't put your hand on every single stove. Same with this. We can we'll see like we'll see taillights and know, oh, there's something going on. And then that's the car you were talking about stalled in the left lane. Whereas a computer has to like see the damn car.
Right. We're getting there.
All right. Adams, introduce our next topic because this is one you had. First of all, you had great examples. Second of all, this is like right up your alley.
Well, and I think there's a tiny segue here, if I can be bold enough to say that, when engineering is lagging a little bit behind what human beings already sort of intrinsically know, this topic here is talking about how, as car heads, we sort of know that the best cars are a total package. They're not just one thing or the other. To simplify the package, we could talk about how good it looks, three big parts, how good it looks, the aesthetics, or the driving dynamics, and or the performance. And those three things kind of like blended together. And we could separate them out and say that looks are subjective because we know that a Ferrari is better looking than maybe a Dodge minivan. We all sort of like know this, but we can pick attractive versus homely even within the same category. The second thing, the driving dynamics, we can say, how it handles for brakes. Is it full of rattles? Does it reward the driver with some feeling of connection? Is it one of those things? And those are a little bit more difficult to assess, but in the end result, they're clear. The last thing is the heart of the car, which is its engine, the engine and powertrain. And we're not just talking about now, which people love to brag about street horsepower, 800, 900,000 horsepower. We're not talking about here in this segment about just in terms of raw power, but in terms of torque and how's that power delivered? Is it smooth? And a lot of times, is it reliable? Can you live with this power plant over time? So as those are all together, ultimately, does the engine deliver performance worthy of the car? So in this next section, we're all going to pick cars where the car's looks made a promise that their engine could not keep. So that's what we'll be taking a look at here. And this is going to be fun because we all know them like individually. Can I go ahead and pick on the quintessential example that was brought up by Haggerty, which I personally like that magazine?
Yeah, I just want to go back. So this is interesting to me because you see this car, whatever it may be, and you get this visceral response like, oh my God, it's so cool. But the soul of the car is when you turn the ignition and or whatever it does. Or it starts that way, but then you're calling AAA to get towed all the time. So it is to me, it's the soul of the vehicle that that finalizes that visceral connection. Because you want a looker, yeah, but you also want a driver, and
Yeah.
that's the soul, the
Yeah.
soul of it. So it's
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And Adams, you're going to introduce the quintessential one from Haggerty, and I didn't pick it, but talk about that one because I think that's if you were to take 20 car guys, this would be the most popular answer, period.
I think it would be too, and that we don't want to overhammer Haggerty's point, but I think it's the one that stands out. It's the DeLorean. The
Yep.
DMC
right.
12 was a car that had a lot of good things going on. It had John D. Z. DeLorean behind it. It had Giugiaro as the designer. It had, they're going to take a sort of underemployed Irish workforce. They're going to put them to work, and they're going to hammer out this car. They're going to make it in stainless steel. All these great things. And then somewhere in the design committee, they decided to put up what was a PRV, which is Peugeot, Renault, Volvo V6. It's a collaborative effort of a rather, excuse me, DeLorean people, a tragic engine choice. It was a terribly underpowered vehicle. It was rough at idle. It just didn't deliver. And, they're trying to go after a rear engine sort of market. Hey, we can be Porsche too. Well, they couldn't. And so you ended up with Steve, what did you say? It was a bad car that only got worse. What was your comment prior
No,
to
because the idea is this is a good car let
Yeah.
down by by a lousy engine. And I said the DeLorean was a lousy car let down by a lousy engine.
And it
Because it's
was.
true.
It had rather sorry build quality. We used to joke in the United States to say that a car built on a Monday or a Friday was terrible because Friday everybody's looking to get off and Monday they're all hung over. Well, I'm afraid in the Irish workforce that was 7 days a week, so you couldn't pick a good day.
Hey, watch it now. I'm Irish. But also the DeLorean came with so much hype that the build up to the DeLorean was we as kids, I
Cars
was
that
young.
didn't deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying like you kind of paused there. You had an internet moment there, Adams, but I was saying there was so much hype
I have a
around the
PRV V6 internet provider.
there was so much build up and hype to the DeLorean that I mean the world was expecting this unbelievable new we didn't talk about supercars back then, but I mean, it's kind of a supercar. And then when it came out, you're like, you got to be kidding me. This is ridiculous.
There
And
was a dealer near me when I was growing up on Long Island, and I forget what the brand was, but they were going to sell DeLoreans. So they put up a banner saying "Coming soon, DeLorean." So of course, I stopped and walked in, and I said, "Do you have any?" He said, "No." I said, "When are you going to get them?" He goes, "We don't know. We were just going to wait." And this went on for over a year, and there was no DeLorean. And I would check in periodically, and whenever I was driving by, and they're like, "No." And it took like a year and a half. They finally got their first one. It was woefully delayed, and then it was just not a good car.
Just wasn't. It had all the promise in the world. And we were I think a lot of us were sort of like rooting, oh, is John Z going to pull it off? Just did never get there. And of course that ended poorly as a result.
So
all right,
yeah, go ahead,
your
Stefan.
first one, Adams. You ready?
I loved your first one. I thought it was real.
Okay,
I
that
loved
was
all of
Adam's
yours.
first
I
one.
loved all of. I haven't seen Stefan's yet, but I loved yours.
All right, so who's next? Me?
Adams can do his first.
All right, do Adams, do your first one. Ready?
Sure. Oh, oh yeah. Okay. You got it pulled up there?
What
There
was
it
it?
is.
The Triumph Stag, is that showing up?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
should be.
yeah,
It's
we got
there.
it.
Yeah.
We got it.
Okay, well, this I started with my oldest pick first because I'm the elder of the group here, and when this car was originally offered, Triumph was a pretty they were a respectable builder. It was a very handsome car, well finished, unique 2+2 Targa arrangement. As you can see, it has a back seat, it has a rollover protection and/or body stiffener, designed by Michelotti, and if you can believe it at the time, this is not a joke, they wanted to compete with the Mercedes SL.
Oh,
Triumph had aspirations to, and this is getting mildly technical, but they were going to combine the crankshaft of this particular engine, like, hey, we're going to build an engine family that's going to have a 4.6 and a V8, and we're going to make all these, efficiencies in engineering. So they make this V8, and so they've got this car to put it in, which is the Triumph Stag, which is incredible. I think very good looking. Now, we can all
Yep.
weigh in on that.
Yep.
But when that car was launched, and it has leather interior and canvas roofing and wood veneer accents, and it's
Just
going to have a
saying,
big, say
it's
that
got a
again.
4-cylinder.
This
It's got that
ended up,
single pipe coming out, a single exhaust pipe coming out underneath it.
that was just to constrict the power even more. That that was that was their desire. So
Yeah, you paid extra.
what Triumph in their wisdom did is to build their own V8. And it was a 3 liter or a 3.5 liter, depending on what year it was. And it was horribly designed. And oh yeah, I see what you're looking at with that single pipe, that single down pipe. Yeah,
Yeah.
gosh, I didn't even notice that. But it was horribly down on power. These cars, even when they were new, now let me put it mildly in perspective. When they launched this car at the British Car Show, they had an immediate 12-month pre-sold backlog of production.
Wow.
Immediate. They didn't leave the show and they had orders for that many cars. Well, shortly thereafter, head cooling problems, warping of cylinders, valves that didn't valve anymore, seals that forgot to seal, stuff, body parts coming off. I mean, so many terrible things going wrong, largely as the result of the motor. And Steph, if you keep on scrolling down, you'll see there's one with the roof up. There's one with the hard top in
Oh,
place.
that's
Look at that. That's
gorgeous.
a very
Look at
attractive
that.
car. And there's with the hard top off in the very bottom, with different
And
wheels.
lemon on the
Oh,
front license plate.
I think a little fourth telling there. No kidding. But this car was replacing engines in the first year of ownership.
Oh, jeez.
Now, if you're Triumph, you cannot do that very long. You can't sustain that as a business model. And here's the sadness, and we'll move on. The sadness of this car's failure is at their fingertips. Triumph had the 3.5 liter Buick V8 sitting there on a shelf in whatever volume they wanted available. Rover had purchased the licensing rights. British Leyland had those rights. Triumph was part of British Leyland. They could have had that motor. Super reliable, 200 horsepower instead of this measly 160 horse motor they had. They could have had a world killer. And I think in the looks department, they would have delivered, but in the reliability department, they failed and it just killed. When was the last time you saw a Triumph Stag on the road?
Nurse. Hey,
Like, never.
was that Buick engine the one they put in the MGB GT?
Absolutely, man. You
Okay, right.
called it.
That was a great, yeah, okay. All right. That's the end. Why? Yeah,
And about a zillion Rovers after that.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Stefan. What do you
All
got?
right. So me, I took a little different take on this. I'm gonna do my share here, my first
Why are
one.
we not surprised, Stefan?
Yeah.
Well, all right. So I'm going a little modern here. The Nissan GT should have the picture up. Oh, here
Do
it
we
is.
have to look at it?
Now here we go.
No.
What? What?
No.
Okay, hold
I want to
on.
hear this.
This is the Nissan GTR. It's got this amazing 3.8 liter V6 that everybody wants to tune. They want to do all kind of stuff this motor. But these cars have been nothing but plagued with transmission and oil pump failures. The oil pumps on these things fail and the engines detonate under very aggressive use and tuning. This car was built to be a tuner car. But you've got to do all kind of things to the oil pump, otherwise you're going to blow your engine up. So to me, the engine's a little, they let down the car with the engine, and this car was never a great success. I don't know if that had to do with it, but that's my first one, kind of a little contrarian.
I drove one of these. Oh
Oh,
my gosh,
God,
is it
they're
fast?
insane. Yes.
Unbe Untuned in stock. I don't know. I don't even know why you want to tune it. This thing is a monster. They call it Godzilla for a reason. This is a fast car, as fast as the uh, contemporary
Yes.
911 Turbo S.
But
Oh my
lots of
gosh, this
engine
thing's
problems.
fast. It,
But engine problems because of oil pump failures. That oil pump fails, your engine detonates.
yeah, but if you don't tune it, yeah, I'm sure you go forever.
Yeah, but how can you not tune this car? This car just
Yeah,
like it's
you don't need
screaming to be
to.
tuned. They all chip
Adam,
them. Everybody chips these cars.
Adams, you ever own one of these?
I have not, but I have an interesting story, and he's a follower of this show. A friend of mine who is an incredibly gifted machinist, mechanic. He is the only person I know who is an actual rocket scientist. I won't name his name in case his identity would rather be shielded. He did enough favors for a wealthy neighbor that he was given a GTR.
Well,
But the
we probably
caveat,
don't. We don't want to know what kind of favors got him that.
well, it was all automotive. It was all like
Okay, all right.
he did a lot of work for the guy automotively because he's a very good and generous person. He was given a GTR and it
Wow.
had a massive oil pump failure. That was part of the deal. I mean, it wasn't like,
Ah, there we go. All right.
yeah, he the timing chain tensioners had failed, et cetera, et cetera. So he did a whole lot of work and resurrected the car. But it's an absolute rocket ship.
Yes.
Now
Yeah,
it runs, but
I,
it
I,
takes
I,
All
the
right.
rocket
I
science.
get it.
Yeah.
All right, it's an interesting pick. So I expected no less, Stefan.
Okay.
My first pick is sacrilegious, and
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be struck by a red and blue lightning as I say this, but the original E30 M3, and
Oh,
the reason I say this is that there were two problems with it. And I was shopping for a car back then, and I looked closely, not at the M3 because it was too much money. It was like $35,000 for this. Had a four-cylinder engine. It had lots of power. I'm thinking 200-ish, but there was no power until you get up toward the red line. So it was very peaky and not very drivable for that reason. So expensive, and for around $25,000, $10,000 less, you can get a 325 IS, nice manual transmission, and it felt faster than this. I'd never driven one of these, but that's what everyone said. And I just remember being offended by the price. And it's a homologation special. That's why it had that four-cylinder engine. But I think the engine should have been a much more powerful and torquey V6 or inline six.
Steve, is in BMW vernacular speak, is this an E30?
Yeah.
Okay. And so this has some punched out four cylinder, but they had the inline six available. That's what is crazy.
It was a homologation thing. So they put the four cylinder in because of homologation, and then they brought it over here. It didn't sell well because it was so expensive. Now, of course, they're very valuable.
I was going to say, how mad does it make you that this is one of the most valuables of the M cars?
Yeah, and the car I would have bought, which is $25,000, is now worth 6,000 or 6,000 or 12,000, and that one's worth 150 or 100. All right, so Adams, next one.
Oh, let's see.
This is such a good pick. This is so great.
Oh, thank you for that because I thought it was a little obscure when I chose it. But what we're looking
It's a
at
lot obscure.
it is the Lancia Scorpion is what they called it in the US, but it's a Monte Carlo is what they called it in Europe. And the one on the top here is the sort of punched out, flared out version that was a little bit modified. And, Lancia was following up with their incredible, what was the 2.4 liter car, the Stratos, that had won the World Rally Championship just before. So they had the attention of the world. They chose the same designer and said, hey, look, we're going to build one that's a little bit more streetable. We're going to make our mark in the United States, which would be a huge market for us, as well as across the world with a more affordable, more approachable, more production-friendly car. So they come out with the Monte Carlo in Europe. Of course, they cannot use that name in the US because of, I think somebody at Chevrolet got a little irritated at that name. And so they take this phenomenal looking car and they stick Fiat's worst, lowliest four cylinder. Sounds like we're picking on four cylinders here, but they pick an 86 horsepower,
86 horsepower.
86,
Oh my gosh.
as in negative caret sign below 100 horsepower. to put in this car, and you talk about something that did not deliver on the promise. I mean, if you just stared at this car and said, okay, that's probably a mid 70s or early 80s design, which I think it started in 76 and ended in 81, you would think, well, that's a 150 horse car. I mean, surely, because
The bonnet, the hood is huge.
oh, well, it's
They could have crammed the small block V8 in there.
and people have, Steph. It's interesting you would say that. Now, this is a mid-engine car, so everything's happening behind those
Oh,
front seats. Yes, and
oh
so
my gosh, it looks like a front engine car.
they put this pathetic little Fiat motor in there. And so subsequent to this, people have put everything from, a turbo Fiat motor to an Alpha, what they call the Busso V6. They've put all kind of motors in here to try to pump them up. But, these are DIY efforts, not what the
Yeah.
factory did. And
Jeez.
so that car was really let down by a total lack of power.
I remember these cars well. A friend of mine actually, his mom was Italian, and she got a Lancia Beta, which
Yeah,
was a four-seat version of this, but it looked the same. And
very good
The
looking.
Scorpion looked a little sportier, so it was a little different. But it was really, I remember got a ride a couple times, and it was just sad. It was just so slow.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, but like all Italian cars, it was slow, good looking, but at least it was unreliable and expensive.
Yeah, and
Oh man.
when it broke, it continued to rust.
Uh,
That even though it was
yeah,
stable, it was continuing to rust away. So
yeah. All right, Stefan.
All right, my turn.
Yeah.
Here we go. So here's my next one. So
Oh,
this is the
wow, you've
I
made
like
really
this.
interesting choices.
2003 to 2012 Mazda RX-8, where they came out with the new 1.3 Renesis rotary engine, and you got to give Mazda credit. They have tried and tried and tried to make the rotary engine work. It's super compact. I mean, it puts out a lot of horsepower, not as many moving parts, but innovative, fun. But man, nothing but the the rotary engine is basically a triangle. And this little point of each triangle's got to maintain a seal as it rotates around. Well, they get apex seal failures. These things eat oil up, and they were not reliable, unfortunately, because this was kind of a cool car. It was designed to be a two-seater, kind of maybe a plus two, put some little kids in the back, AK like a 911. Lots of fun, great driving cars, but the engines they just have had difficulties with these engines. So that's my pick.
And you're right, Steph. Mazda keeps trying. They are not afraid to be innovative on stuff, which I appreciate.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I remember
Right.
these had a little third door, or there was a
Yes.
door
Yeah.
behind on the passenger side. You could
Right here,
open
you
that
can see the
up.
door right there.
Yeah, you can open it up and get into the back seat for kids. But I love that choice. You're right. It's a good looking car.
It's a great car. They were a lot of fun to drive, but boy, not from an engine standpoint.
Well, that's a great segue for my next one, which is the NA or the first generation 1990 Mazda Miata. This was a factory color back then. It was like a very bright, brilliant blue, like a shark blue for Porsche. And I know this color well because I was driving my Ford Contour leaving Lackland Air Force Base, and the road was slippery. And I stopped on the interstate because there was a backup. And this Miata was coming up behind me, and he didn't stop. And he ran right into the back of my car. And he was braking, so that went under my car and lifted my car up. And my car was undamaged, except that it had a little blue spot. And I kind of liked it, so I left it there
A little
for,
Smurf
for
mark.
for the next 10 years that I had that car. So anyway, but it was a great handling car, and it just needed more power. It has more power now. And if it had the same power then that it had now, I think it would have been a better car. I know it's great, and it's almost sacrilegious to do that too, to rain on this wonderful car. But it just needed more power, probably 25 more horsepower.
Yeah,
You know,
I
eh,
go
uh,
ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that, when this car came out, it was doing its dangdest, and I think a very good job of reinterpreting the Lotus Elan S1. But so even if you go that many years in the past, look at the Lotus Elan, which was horribly unreliable. So I'll go ahead and put that out there. It still had 140 horse. And this car had what on its best day, 108?
13, 110, 113.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
not enough to really propel it forward.
Right.
And you're right. Now, this is a car that a lot of people, salute because it was the one that they could put in the driveway for not a lot of money, not spend a lot of money to race it every single weekend and not tear it up. But yeah, I've never thought about that as being not the greatest engine choice for
Well,
them.
they talked about it being balanced, balance of power handling for the size, and it was the motor that they actually you could turbo. It's an iron block. As part, it's kind of heavy, but you could this motor was turbocharged in some of the other Mazdas. But the NB, I've got the NB version, which is the Series
Yours is
2, the
turbo,
next.
is it not,
No, no, no,
Steph?
mine's standard. I've
Okay.
I've
But it
got
has
a
more power.
yeah, I put a different intake on it and I put a racing exhaust on it. So I bumped up the horsepower. But these were a blast to drive, but these were super amenable to putting a supercharger in them. And
Right.
then that's a nice car. This NA with a supercharger is a lot of fun. And they usually put the supercharger intake right there on the headlight intake. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, all right. Adams.
Okay, you talk about sacrilege. Here we go. My third and final pick, the Toyota Land Loser
Loser. But
2025. I mean, I'm just embarrassed. I mean,
you got to read the
Toyota,
second line. Read the second line.
how to emasculate your most masculine car. I
Oh,
mean, when they pull this car off the market, and I know that I'm going to get into slings and arrows of either my co-host or a lot of people who think that this car is the second coming. It was attempting to be that. They pulled it off the market, and everybody's either like, in either, they're in tears that they've seen the last one, or they're hopeful that the next one, the anticipation is coming. So they leave the world after the Land Cruiser nameplate started off life as kind of a CJ Jeep sort of vehicle. Then it progresses to an inline six, a pretty good motor, bigger car, family hauler, still will do off-road if you need it to. And it went a little bit too far. The pendulum swung too far. Big luxurious V8, six-figure price tag if you loaded one up, and they leave the market. Well, when they come back, they're either to the disappointed ranks who are hopeful or the anticipatory ranks thinking the better thing's coming. And what they did is both. They disappointed those who had anticipated it. And I am so disgusted that they would pick a four-cylinder as their leader car, their halo car. And that's what it looks like under the hood. Heaven help
what
us,
a mess.
Toyota.
Oh my
Look at what
God.
it's a total mess.
God.
It's a total mess. I mean, if Toyota has their pick of turbo V6s and naturally aspirated V8s, they have hybrid power plants. I don't know. I can't question the intelligence of Toyota because they're, among the top manufacturers in the world. And they'll go down in history as doing a lot of right things. I'm afraid to say I think this was a wrong thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a real Land Cruiser. It's a Forerunner with a different body.
It's a
Um,
forerunner. You're
and
My
right.
favorite vehicle of all time,
yeah,
effing Forerunners,
the effing runner.
effing runner.
That
But
and a Bentley Continental, you'd be happy.
nothing wrong with the Forerunner. I love the Forerunner, but it's not a Land Cruiser. It should be a different platform. And by the way, the rest of the world, it is a different platform. There's the 300 series is available in other parts of the country, but not in the United States, except as the Lexus LX. And it's a shame. I just feel like you already have the Forerunner. Why don't you just keep the Forerunner? And if you're going to not bring the Land Cruiser over, the 300 series, then don't have a Land Cruiser.
Agreed. Agreed. Leave that nameplate alone. And I hate to say that a company as rich in history as Toyota is, with a culture that is super rich in history, they pretty well dissed the Supra, not the topic of tonight's conversation. And now they, to me, have kind of dissed the Land Cruiser.
All right, we'll just do three, and I think I just have one more to go, and then we'll wrap it
Okay.
up.
Oh, I got two.
Uh,
I got two more to go. But go ahead. You want to do
okay.
yours?
Yeah, the Plymouth Prowler is my next one. I want to skip over that because that's too obvious.
Okay.
Oh, but it's
Um,
a great one.
yeah, but it's such a niche car, and I would say it's not a great car. and it's let down by a terrible engine. So it's, if you put a V8 in that, it's still not really a great car. And then I put down the 4.6 liter Mustang from the 90s. It was so stupid. They have 5.0 in the Fox body. Everyone loved the 5.0, 5.05. And they were like, nah, 4.6 is just as good. It has more power. It's great. And everyone just said no. And then they finally relented and came back with the 5.0, which we have today, all these years later. But my real one is the 1978 Corvette with 140 horsepower. And this is
Wow.
such an outrage. This 1978, just 10 years early, they had basically 400 horsepower, probably more than that in their big block. And 10 years later, it was like ridiculously slow. 0 to 60 was like 11 seconds. This was such an outrage that I think GM is still paying for what they did back then.
Wow, what a great pick. And you sort of walked us up the ladder there. I didn't know you were going to
Yeah,
end up at
very
the
nice.
Corvette. That's right, because a lot of enthusiasts, I among them, started like notching downward in the Corvette's so-called progression, at least the advancement of years.
Yeah.
My respect for them went down each year incrementally.
Yeah, so we'll
All
move
right.
on to electric cars in a sec
Hold on.
after
I
I
gotta do
know,
my two. I gotta do my two real
I
quick, real
I
quick.
know, I know.
All right, here we go. I'm going to up the, let me, I got two more. I got two more engines because I got, yeah,
What we're
you,
hoping you can do is multitask, find those and
there we
rant.
go. Because you guys would never, ever mention Porsche being disappointed by an engine. But hey, the M96 with the IMS bearing issue, that was a bad deal. So that for your listeners, that intermediate shaft bearing would fail, completely destroying these engines. So if you get one of these Porsches from the years 1999, 2005, the fried egg headlight cars and 996s, you've got to get this IMS bearing fixed. Um, so I know you two Porsche files wouldn't bring that, but now I'm going to bring up this to me is the
I'm
best one.
reeling in horror. How about you, Steve?
You're what?
I'm reeling in horror.
Oh,
Okay.
But
I
I think
completely
he's
agree
right.
with
I'm
Stefan.
afraid
I
he's
Okay.
could, I completely agree.
Here's the best car with the worst engine ever. So the
Oh,
Jaguar
man.
XJ220, 1992. This car, same thing. This was in every car and driver, road and track. They're talking about the new coming of Jag, the X220. People are ordering it because it's going to have the concept car, the big V8, the big, or maybe a V12, and it comes out and it's got a V6. People canceled their orders on it. And what a disappointment that was. It sounds awful. It's got a V6. And to me, that was the beginning of the epic failure of Jaguar as we know it. They tried with this car to make a big comeback versus the F40, the Testarossa, and the Countach, but they dropped the V6 in this, and the world still is not ready for a V6 in a super or hypercar.
God, you make a good point. Yep. Don't disagree.
That's
Okay.
a great point. In fact, the lesson that Jaguar learned in the 80s with that car, Mercedes just learned with their C63. And they
Yes,
tried to have that with a
absolutely.
four-cylinder,
With
and
a four-cylinder hybrid. And
yeah,
people were
four.
like, no, no,
So
no.
what happened was they're
Yeah,
like, no, this has more power. The Germans, this has more power. And the customers literally said, no, we're not going to buy any of them. We're
yeah,
going to buy zero.
yeah.
Watch,
And they said, all right, look, all right, we'll give you V8.
watch me
So,
unwrite a check. Yeah.
yeah. So you're right, Stefan. You got to have something like legit. So,
Right.
all right, talk about electric cars because on the one hand, electric cars are fading rapidly. On the other hand, there's one brand in one country that is still alive and growing.
Yeah, so for a long time on this show, you know, we like the idea of electric cars, but we're like the world is not ready. Infrastructure, charging, apartments, the world is just not ready. And combustion engines, the ICE engine has made so much progress. We're now looking at synthetic fuels, but all the manufacturers, Ford, Farley, GM, Porsche, jumped on this bandwagon like we've got to make EVs. And they put tons and tons of money into it. And like Steve has said, people, the dogs aren't eating the dog food. People weren't buying the cars. Now, Norway, high penetration of electric vehicles. China, high penetration electric vehicles. What's happened is because of all the money that Ford, Range Rover, all these Toyota, well, Toyota didn't spend as much money as other countries, but they spent so much money. Now they're all pulling back and they're putting money back into the combustion engines. Well, eventually the infrastructure is going to catch up, but the one company that is light years ahead of even Tesla is BYD. BYD is a Chinese company. They manufacture over 22 different electric vehicles. They have an unbelievable database on autonomous driving on the China highways. Their autonomous software is probably going to be probably one of the leaders in the world of autonomous driving software when we get to level 5. What I am predicting is that because China, the way finances work over there, they can continue to fund BYD. BYD is going to be profitable in China. Because when EVs do come to marketplace as the major market share, it is going to destroy domestic manufacturing of automobiles that didn't have pulled the money out now because unless there are tariffs, which, we're now talking in politics, there are going to be tariffs. But if countries do not protect their automotive industry with tariffs, like them or leave them, BYD is going to come in at a price point with such a far superior product that our domestic manufacturers will not be able to have a product that is equal or as good to as BYD. And I think the Chinese EV industry, because first of all, they control the lithium, the minerals, the battery making, everything that we are quantumly behind already for GM, BYD. I mean, and when they do come, when the market does come that we're going to be driving mostly EVs, you're not going to be looking at a Ford. You're probably going to want the BYD, unless it's got a 30-40% tariff to protect our industry, which, we are headed there right now with the current political economy that we have. So that's kind of my long term and BYD and the Chinese will destroy the English automotive industry. The English automotive industry is already a fraction of what it used to be. And think of all
You
the
mean English
nameplates.
as in UK? You mean,
UK. Yeah, think about, yeah, you think about
I mean, who even makes cars there
well, there's
anymore?
still some Land Rovers that are made over there. MGs are made in China, but this is and there's still Aston Martin boutique manufacturers and Bentley and Rolls. Those are boutique, but in terms of large production, I think it's a scary thought for our domestic manufacturing. But I think we're so far behind that when we finally get to it in this country, but other countries, take Europe, the EU. I mean, when they let BYD come in without any tariffs, it's going to hurt the EU because they're not putting out, they have a few electric cars, but they don't have 22 that are state of the art that are nice.
Okay, give us something hopeful here on BYD, like dumb it down, like for people like me who
I'll
need to
give you
have it
something
down.
hopeful.
Okay.
I'll give you something hopeful. First, something kind of funny, and that is I can't think of BYD without thinking of underwear in the 80s. I know it was BVD, but I can't think. It's all I think is underwear.
Yep.
Number one.
Just
Number two, um, Chinese tech is never, ever as good as people think it is. I know they've got this deep seek thing for AI. I don't think it's going to be that good. It's never that good. Their tech is not that good because they don't have a creative infrastructure. They have a theft infrastructure. So they get your tech and they try to duplicate it. And you can only, by the time you get it and figure it out, you're already behind. So I don't think they're ahead. They are ahead with batteries for sure, and they're ahead with manufacturing and manufacturing cheap, but they're not ahead on tech, number one. Or number two. The other point, which is really critical, and that is that they are headed inexorably toward this demographic disaster.
yes.
The average age of a Chinese person is it's aging every single year. They have a net loss of people every single year. And the smart kids who have to create your tech are 45 now, and they're going to be 65 in 20 years. I just don't worry that much about BYD, medium and long term. Short term, sure, but you can fix the short term with tariffs.
All right, just go back. Remember when Toyota, Datsun,
Nice
Honda
point.
came to America? It was like, "Pfft, these Japanese cars, these are pieces of shit. No one's ever want to buy these. They're not, they're just, but look where they are today. well, Nissan not so much, but Toyota definitely. So I think if you look at history does repeat itself, but I think they're just so far. I mean, think about it. They've been making your damn iPhone for the last how many years now they've been making your iPhones, okay?
Well, it's Taiwan,
It's not a giant step.
but they
My,
didn't create the
my
iPhone. They didn't engineer the iPhone.
They didn't, I know,
they
but they're
make it.
making it. But they
Yeah.
stole everything about it, and they've got the highway, they've got their versions of it. So,
minor point of moderation in between the two. If BYD is able to license some of their programs that are deemed so superior now, then maybe a Tesla or a German company, manufacturer unnamed, is able to pick up that ability to license the engineering and or what it is that makes their charge range so much better. I'm not sure what it is that they brag about that makes them superior, but to me, to try to emerge as a manufacturer now is so phenomenally difficult.
yes.
I mean, you can have great tech, but you may not pass crash standards. You may not pass DOT and EPA standards. You may not pass the ability, like we're talking about with tariffs. You can't get through that gateway just with great tech. So
No,
hopefully
you need
they'll
engineering
bring
too.
something to the table.
Right.
You need engineering too. And let's face it, they have a lot of money. And they have the country behind them. So they could easily just build a factory here and start cranking them out here in this country. Then, of
Yes.
course, they're exempt from tariffs. But
Just
again,
Honda did it, Toyota did it. So,
that's, but
BMW did it.
but when China, when Japan did it and Germany did it in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they did not have anything like this demographic disaster that is approaching for China.
right. All the more reason they'd want to move it onshore to us.
All right. Well, hey, before we close, and we're out of time, but I threw this up. You don't show the picture, but I thought of one car, and you guys can opine because I know you guys got to agree with me. It's a car that had a great engine, and the car was completely unworthy of the engine. And that was the 2005, the early 2000s Pontiac GTO. And it was this
Oh,
it
what
was
a good
stupid
pick. Yeah,
looking
yeah,
jelly bean car.
Yes.
It looked
yeah,
nothing like it looked so wimpy and so sad and just
yeah.
pathetic. And yet had this wonderful Corvette engine. I think it was an LT1. Maybe it was an LT2 or 3. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. And a manual transmission. And it just was awful. It was offensive.
Oh,
Yes.
that
Yes.
is such, if you had asked me all week to think about this question, you're right. That motor had everything going for it, and that body style had nothing going for it. It's an amalgam of about 10 different cars. I can just look at it and see a Subaru SVX, a Pontiac Trans Am from 1992. Yeah, and Steph has got the pointer going to the exact spot. It,
So yeah, Stephen, my car that I had picked the Chevy SSR, that stupid convertible
Yeah,
pickup truck, because they put the LS2 V8 in that car, in that
yeah.
truck thing, whatever. So, not two General Motors products that they dropped great engines in, but this once again, you know, they had the soul, but there was nothing with it.
They were unworthy.
Yes.
All right. That was fun. Close this out, man.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, listening, or watching if you're on YouTube. Remember to like, listen, subscribe, hit that bell. And we'll do these intermittently every couple of weeks. But if you're subscribed, you'll get notified when there's a new episode up. Have a great week.